4 a.m. can be a devastating hour. The day, no matter what kind of day it was, is indisputably over. Almost instantaneously, a new day begins. And how will one bear it? Probably no better than one bore the day that is ending. Possibly not as well. Moreover, a day is coming which one will not recall, that last day of one's life. And on that day, one will oneself become as irrecoverable as all the days that have passed. It is a fearful speculation, or rather, a fearful knowledge that one day one's eyes will no longer look out on the world. One will no longer be present at the universal morning roll call. The light will rise for others, but not for you. Sometimes, at 4 a.m., this knowledge is almost enough to force a reconciliation between oneself and all of one's pain and error. Since, anyway, it will end one day, why not try it? Life, one more time. It's a long, old road, as Bessie Smith puts it, but it's got to find an end. And so she wearily, doggedly informs us. I picked up my bag, baby, and I tried it again. Her song ends on a very bitter and revealing note. You can't trust nobody. You might as well be alone. Found my long lost friend, and I might as well stayed at home. Still, she was driven to find that long lost friend, to grasp again with fearful hope the unwilling, unloving human hand. I think all our voyages drive us there, for I've always felt that a human being could only be saved by another human being. I am aware that we do not save each other very often, but I am also aware that we save each other some of the time. And all that God can do, and all that I expect him to do, is lend one the courage to continue one's journey and face one's end when it comes, like a man. For perhaps, between now and that last day, something wonderful will happen. A miracle of coherence and release. And the miracle of which one's unsteady attention is focused is always the same. However it may be stated, or however it may remain unstated. It is this miracle of love strong enough to guide us or drive one into great estate of maturity. Or to put it another way, into the apprehension and acceptance of one's own identity. For some deep and irreducible instinct, I believe, causes us to know it is only this passionate achievement which can outlast death, which can cause life to spring from death. Nevertheless, sometimes at 4 a.m., when one feels that one has probably become simply incapable of supporting this miracle, with all one's wounds awake and throbbing, and all one's ghastly inadequacies staring and shouting from the walls to the floor. The entire universe having shrunk to the prison of oneself. Death glows like the only light on a high, dark mountain road, where one has forever and forever lost one's way. And many of us perish then. But if one can reach down into oneself, into one's life, and find there some witness, however unexpected or an ambivalent, to one's reality, one will be enabled, though perhaps not very spiritedly, to face another day. We used to sing in church, it's another day's journey, and I'm so glad the world can't be no harm. What one must be able to recognize at 4 o'clock in the morning is that one has no right, at least not for reasons of private anguish, to take one's life. All lives are connected to other lives, and when one man goes, much more than that man goes with him. One has to look at oneself as the custodian of a quantity and a quality, oneself, which is absolutely unique in the world, but because it has never been here before and will never be here again. It is extremely difficult in this place and time to look on oneself in this way, where all human connections are distrusted and the human being is very quickly lost. 4 a.m. passes, the danger is turning, maneuvered once more. And here comes the sun or the rain in the hard, metallic, unrevealing light and sounds of life outside and movement in the street. Cautiously, one peeks through the blinds, guessing at the weather. And presently, out of the limbo of the bathroom steam and fog, one's face comes floating up again from unimaginable depths. Here it comes, unreadable as ever, the patient bones steady beneath the skin, eyes veiling the mind's bewilderment and the heart's loss. Only the lips cryptically suggesting that all is not well with the spirit which lives within this clay. Then one selects the uniform which one will wear. This uniform is designed to telegraph to others what to see so that they will not be made uncomfortable and probably hostile by being forced to look on another human being. The uniform must suggest a certain setting. It must dictate a certain air, and it must also convey, however subtly, a dormant aggressiveness, like the power of a sleeping lion. It is necessary to make anyone on the street think twice before attempting to vent his despair on you. So armed, one reaches the unloved streets. The unloved streets. I have very often walked through the streets of New York fancying myself a kind of unprecedented explorer, trapped amongst savages searching for hidden treasure. The trick being, cover the treasure before the savage discovered me. Hence, my misleading uniform. After all, I have lived in cities in which stone urns on park parapets were not unthinkable. Cities in which it was perfectly possible and not a matter of taking one's life in one's hands to walk through the park. How long would a stone urn last in Central Park? And look at the New York buildings rising up like the tyrannical eagles, glass, steel, and aluminum smiting the air. Jerry built, inept, contemptuous. Who can function in these buildings? And for those profits, where they built? Unloved indeed. Look at our children. They roam the streets as arrogant and irreverent as businessmen, and as dangerous as those gangs of children who roam the streets of bombed European cities after the last World War. Only these children have no strange and grinning soldiers to give them chocolate candy or chewing gum, and no one will give them a home. No one has one to give. The very word no longer conveying any meaning, and in any way, nothing is more vivid in American life than the fact that we have no respect for our children, nor have our children any respect for us. By being what we have become, by placing things above people, we broke their hearts early and drove them away. We have, as it seems to me, a very curious sense of reality, or rather perhaps I should say a striking addiction to irreality. How is it possible, one cannot but ask, to raise a child without loving the child? How is it possible to love the child if one does not know who one is? How is it possible for a child to grow up if the child is not loved? Children can survive without money, or security, or safety, or things, but they are lost if they cannot find a loving example. For only this example can give them a touchstone for their lives. Thus far and no further. This is what the father must say to the child. If the child is not told where the limits are, he will spend the rest of his life trying to discover them. For the child who is not told where the limits are knows that though he may not know, he knows it, that no one cares enough about him to prepare him for his journey. This, I think, has something to do with the phenomenon, unprecedented in the world, of the ageless American boy. It has something to do with our desperate adulation of simplicity and youth. How bitterly betrayed one must have been in one's youth to suppose that it is a virtue to remain simple or to remain young. And it also helps to explicate, to my mind at least, some of the stunning purposes to which Americans have put the imprecise science of psychiatry. I have known people in genuine trouble who somehow managed to live with their trouble. And I cannot but compare these people, ex-junkies and jailbirds, sons of German Nazis, son of Spanish generals, sons of Southern races, blues singers, and black matrons, with that fluid horde in my professional and quasi-professional contacts, whose only real trouble is inertia, who work at the most disgraceful jobs in order to pay for the luxury of someone else's attention, $25 an hour. To my black and toughened Puritan conscience, it seems an absolute scandal. And again, this particular self-indulgence certainly has a dreadful effect on their children, whom they are quite unable to raise. And they cannot raise them because they have opted for the one commodity which is absolutely beyond human reach: safety. This is one of the reasons, as it seems to me, that we are so badly educated. For to be educated, as all tyrants have always known, is to become inaccessibly independent. It is to acquire a dangerous way of assessing danger. It is to hold in one's hands a means of changing reality. This is not all the same thing as adjusting to reality. The effort of adjusting to reality simply has a paradoxical effects of destroying reality, since it substitutes for one's own speech and one's own voice an internalized public cacophony of quotations. People are defeated or go mad or die in many, many ways. Some in the silence of that valley, where I couldn't hear nobody pray. And many in public sounding horror, where no cry or lament or song or hope can disentangle itself from the roar. And so we go under, victims of that universal cruelty which lives in the heart and in the world, victims of the universal indifference to the fate of another, victims of the universal fear of love, proof of the absolute impossibility of achieving a life without love. One day, perhaps, unimaginable generations hence, we will evolve into the knowledge that human beings are more important than real estate, and will permit this knowledge to become the ruling principle of our lives. For I do not for an instant doubt, and I will go to my grave believing that we can build Jerusalem if we will.